Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Delaware State Housing Authority's HOME-ARP Allocation Plan public hearing. We're just going to give a few more minutes for folks to join us. If you are just joining us, please make sure you put in the chat box your name, your firm, and your email and phone number so that we know who is attending the meeting today. We will get started very shortly. Thank you. Okay, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Delaware State Housing Authority's HOME-ARP Allocation Plan public hearing today on December 19th, 2022. Hold on one second here. Today we will be discussing the HOME-ARP Allocation Plan for DSHA. My name is Cindy DeKine, and I work at the Delaware State Housing Authority. Presenting to today is Marjorie Willow, and we have been working with Marjorie for over the last year. She is with M&L Consulting, and she will be doing the presentation today. Just as a reminder, if you're just getting on, please put your name, your firm, your phone number, your email address in the chat, and please make sure you're also on mute. After the presentation today, we will open the public hearing for any public comments. So with that being said, I'm going to turn it over to Marjorie to give the presentation. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. So just a very quick overview of the program itself. The HOME-ARP plan that we're referring to today is a carve out of the much larger Home American Rescue Plan Act that Congress funded a couple of years back. And this specific element of that legislation provides $5 billion of supplemental home funds to assist individuals or households who are homeless, at risk of homelessness, and other vulnerable populations through the provision of housing, rental assistance, supportive services, and non-congregate shelter. So DSHA is receiving $5,322,495. This is a one-time grant. And they have until September 30th, 2030 to spend all of the funding. So there's 4 qualifying populations. The first is those who are homeless. The second category is those who are at risk of homelessness. The third category includes persons who are fleeing or attempting to flee domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, stalking, or human trafficking. And the fourth category is sort of a catch-all category of other populations who meet one of the following criteria. So families requiring services or housing assistance to prevent homelessness, and those at greatest risk of housing instability, which generally includes households up to 50% of the area median income who are spending more than 50% of their income on housing costs. So we went through an extensive stakeholder outreach process, and it occurred over several months. We engaged with various stakeholders across the state, and this process was combined with Newcastle County as well as the city of Wilmington, two other entities or jurisdictions in the state who are also receiving their own allocation of HOME-ARP funds. We also presented at several meetings of Housing Alliance of Delaware. We appreciate their assistance in trying to reach out even to more stakeholders across the state. And so the next couple of slides give you a very high-level overview of the needs that were identified by stakeholders in this process. So more affordable housing and accessible rental housing for households up to 50% AMI located outside of Wilmington. The thought there being that stakeholders felt that Wilmington really has a significant amount of affordable housing, and to give households more choice to provide the housing, any new housing outside of the city. There are many landlords who are refusing to accept housing choice vouchers for higher market rents, also refusing tenants with mental illness, criminal histories, evictions, poor credit, or released offenders, which means that these individuals and households are finding it even more difficult then to find affordable housing if they have a housing choice voucher. There's an inadequate level of supportive services that if provided, because the level of supportive services currently is lower than what stakeholders feel it should be, that increases the potential for them returning to homelessness. The level of housing choice vouchers is inadequate to serve families in need of subsidized rental housing. There are inadequate emergency shelter beds for individuals and families in crisis, especially those fleeing domestic violence and have no place to go. Supportive services are needed to keep people housed, and examples of what stakeholders mentioned specifically included benefits navigator, mental health, financial counseling, employment training, education, case management, personal care providers, transportation, as well as legal services to either keep their housing or to obtain housing. There is a lack of affordable housing developers coupled with the difficulty in developing multifamily housing. And so while there are some affordable housing developers, there simply aren't enough with the capacity to be able to develop more affordable housing in Delaware. And then also what makes it difficult is public opposition to more multifamily housing in communities, which is a zoning issue, a local zoning issue. Permanent supportive housing, including for chronically homeless, is needed, with more units accessible for persons with disabilities, both physical and sensory disabilities, and with visitable features. And permanent affordable rental housing is needed across Delaware overall to house individuals and families who have tenant-based rental assistance. So there are, households out there who have rental assistance, housing choice vouchers, for example, and they have access to supportive services, but they simply cannot find units where landlords will accept the voucher. The priority needs that were identified in Kent and Sussex counties included emergency shelter beds and units, permanent affordable rental units, and permanent supportive housing, which is affordable rental units with a very strong wraparound supportive service component that accompanies the housing. So based on the needs, and keeping in mind also that the state's allocation amount of HOME-ARP funds is, while it's over $5.3 million, it's simply not enough to address all of the needs that were identified through this process. The state is submitting the following budget to HUD. So for supportive services, $500,000. For the acquisition and development of non-congregate shelter, $1,924,121. For the development of affordable rental housing, which includes permanent supportive housing, $2.1 million. And then for the administration and planning for this grant through 2030, just under $800,000 for DSHA. And that takes up the entire allocation amount. So final slide before we open it up for public comment, but one that we want to make sure you're aware of this information in case somebody signs off early. That oral comments received today will be acknowledged in the final plan that is submitted to HUD. All written comments, which you're more than welcome to submit, and we encourage those to be submitted to Cindy@DelawareStateHousing.com. All written comments must be received by today, December 19th, to be included in the final plan. And the state anticipates submitting their final plan to HUD on or before December 21st, which is Wednesday of this week.
Okay, thank you, Marjorie. We have had lots of public notice in the papers, our highlights, a listserv. So some of you may have said, wow, that doesn't give me a lot of time, but we have been doing our public notice for a while, but we will still accept written comments today. And so again, it's Cindy@DEStateHousing.com. So with that being said, I am going to open this meeting for any public comments. So you may raise your hand through the WebEx, or you may just turn off your mute and give us a question or a comment anytime you're ready. So at this time, I'm going to open it up for any public comments. Big Frost.
I'm curious about the public comments and what's been most requested as far as use of funds.
From the general public, I believe the state has only received a couple of written comments, and nothing else that I'm aware of, right, Cindy? Just those two written ones? Yeah.
Correct. Now, we did get lots of comments during this whole consultation period, and that's where all of those comments and data have pointed to the uses of support services, non-congregate, and creation of affordable units, including public permanent supportive housing. So that's how we got to that place, but we have not received any written comments during the comment period on our proposed uses.
If I could ask a quick follow-up question and then try not to monopolize. In the email, one thing that jumped out at me, and was there was attention to physical disabilities, but not mental health disabilities. If you could comment about the thinking or maybe just the oversight in that.
So in terms of acknowledging the housing and supportive needs for persons with mental illness, is that what you're referring to?
Mm-hmm.
So that actually is a very strong component of both the needs that were identified through the stakeholders and part of the thought process that DSHA was using to identify what the needs, how the budget would be allocated for the eligible activities. So in terms of permanent supportive rental housing with supportive services, that would include persons with mental illness, as long as they meet one of those 4 qualifying populations. So someone who is homeless with mental illness, someone who is at risk of becoming homeless, if they have, if you're talking about persons with mental illness, and then also those fleeing, and then that other catch-all category where there are persons with, who are at risk of becoming homeless and trying to prevent their homelessness. But as long as an individual or a household meets one of those 4 the criteria for one of those 4 qualifying populations, and if they have mental illness, then they're qualified for services and housing.
Okay.
Does that answer your question?
It does. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Does anyone else have any verbal comments that they would like to give? Feel free. I know it's different on a virtual call versus person.
Andy, this is Ben from HTC Mid-Atlantic. Can you give a sense of when, of the timeline for when HUD will approve the plan and then you'll be ready to disperse funds from HOME-ARP?
Sure. So once the state submits its allocation plan, hopefully this week, as planned, then HUD has 45 days to review the plan. And we've been hearing that other communities, it's taking 60 days or longer for HUD to give them an approval or rejection on their plan. While that's happening, the state intends to start developing either applications or an RFP to be issued for developers who would be interested in developing affordable rental housing that is funded through this allocation grant. Unfortunately, the state cannot move beyond issuing RFPs until they receive a final approval from HUD. Technically, they don't have the grant in hand right now, the full grant. And so they might use the next 60 days to try to take care of some of that those administrative requirements that are required. So policies and procedures about how they will go about selecting the recipients, how they will administer the program, and all of those other necessary requirements for federal programs, so that when they do receive approval for their plan, they're ready then to begin identifying subrecipients and allocating funding for them. So that's, if all things work according to plan, then probably this time in maybe February, they should get some word from HUD.
So I guess this is is this being planned with the upcoming tax credit round in mind so that developers can try to assume the use of these funds in their development plans for their applications for the 2023 tax credit round?
I would, if you look at the funding supplement in the tax credit guidelines, the home ARP is just like our home program and housing trust fund, where we will allocate those funds after the allocations of the tax credits have been announced. So, it's very similar. Now, Newcastle County and the city of Wilmington have, different processes for their funding. So you would have to ask those agencies, but just like you can request HDF at application, for whatever the maximums are, but you can't do home or HDF or home ARP at application, unfortunately. Those things are decided after the tax credit awards have been announced.
So I'm sorry, this will be my last question. I won't hog the floor, but are you
That's okay.
saying so if we put in an application with a certain $1 million and normally we say that's HDF, you might decide that half of that should be home ARP and half of that should be HDF? Like we put in a large, whatever the number is, and then you might allocate sources to just decide what should be used?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on your application, if you were determining that some of your permanent supportive housing units are qualifying populations of home ARP, it's possible we could do that. I do think that our priority with the funding is going to be non-congregate and permanent supportive housing. We put the funding in the funding source because it is a funding source of DSHA, and it can be used in tax credits, but it would be determined after allocation. So you really can't request it, and it would be up to DSHA, Ben, to decide are your PSH units going to be housing trust fund? Are they going to be home? Are they going to be home ARP? Or is it just going to be HDF like you apply for? So those decisions are made more in the underwriting phase after your tax credits have been awarded in July.
Thank you.
Just a quick reminder, if you're just joining us, could you please put your name and firm, your email address and phone number in the chat so we can have some kind of documentation of your attendance today? I'd appreciate it. Thanks. Any other comments? There's a couple people who've just joined us. We're discussing the Home ARP program for Delaware State Housing Authority for Kent and Sussex counties, the uses, the qualifying populations, and our proposed uses for that funding. This is all part of the HUD process. We do plan to submit our allocation plan hopefully this week, and we would appreciate any written comments to be sent to my attention, Cindy at destatehousing.com. And all comments today are considered comments at this public hearing. So if anyone has any more comments, feel free to raise your hand or just open your mute. Marjorie and I will be here for a few more minutes. Yes, Marjorie? So we can answer more comments. But if anyone who doesn't have any comments and you've heard everything you wanted to hear, you're welcome to go. As long, I hope you put your name and address in the chat box, but you're welcome to leave. We will definitely be here for a few more minutes to accept any other comments.
Good morning. It's Nicole Waters with Newcastle County. I don't really have a comment, just more so a question. So good morning. Hope everybody's
Good morning.
well. Good morning. So we were planning on applying for the supportive services component for the Newcastle County Hope Center because we do serve a pretty large population that originates from Kent and Sussex County. We are located in Newcastle County, as you know. And I kind of just wanted to know, is there a certain amount or a percentage that you would be looking to keep in your own jurisdiction? Or does that matter as long as we can show that those people originated from downstate? Is that acceptable, or is that something you would recommend us to apply for, that type of funding?
Well, we haven't really determined our RFP NOFA yet. We're going to start that in January. Praying we can get this into the HUD system before the end of the week, if not next week. And then we are going to start developing our policies and procedures and determining the whole NOFA process and our priorities and so forth. Technically, our funding can be for the state, but we were prioritizing Kent and Sussex since Newcastle and the city have their own funding.
Funding as well.
So
Yes.
as I believe we're going to do a draft NOFA, to get some more public comment. And I'm hoping we can do that before we get approval, but we'll see. So I'm not really sure what to tell you, Nicole, at this point.
Okay.
We'll be developing the plan over the next, 3 months. And, you guys will be in that part of the process. Obviously, all of the folks that are on our listserv and highlights will be.
Okay. No, that was perfect. I kind of figured it would be a prioritization. And I know we do have many people sometimes that aren't placed through state service centers in hotels downstate. So they've been placed in our facility. So I understand. So I'll wait to get the updated information. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your comment too. And thanks, Ben and Sue as well. We have a question from Stacy. Apologize. Is this video being recorded and will the slides be available? So yes, we are recording. Hopefully I pushed the button correctly. And also once we make a submission to HUD, we will post everything onto our website. So yes, everything will be available.
Cindy, I can also provide a PDF of the slides today if somebody wants those, as they might be thinking of written comments they want to offer today as well. So I can send you that.
Okay, well, if we have no more verbal comments, we are going to go ahead and close the public hearing as of 10:30 today. Again, we'll send out that the presentation today, and if you have any written comments, please remember to send them to my attention, Cindy at destatehousing.com. And with that being said, we are going to close the public hearing. Thank you very much for your attendance.